This video will address the target. I can distinguish the difference between a bond and an IMF. So an IMF is an intermolecular force, and really kind of hidden in this entire unit is bond versus IMF. So when we talk about compound versus mixture, when we talk about chemical versus physical, in all those situations, we're dealing with the fact, is it chemically bonded or is it just intermolecularly forced together? Am I breaking bonds or am I just breaking IMFs? So really, these two pieces chemically is what we'll talk about all year because they are what we care about, right? Chemistry is all about the force of attraction, and the magnitude of that force dictates everything. So when we talk about the chemical combination of something, what we're talking about is a bond, right? That compound idea, when two or more things come together and they are bonded, they have, a stick. This bond makes it very hard to separate. This bond changes their chemical structure. This bond is really important, okay? And the bond is because they are actually attracting the electrons to the nuclear protons, which we'll kind of talk about next unit. The contrast to that is this kind of physical nature, which we still have substances being connected to one another, kind of magnetically held to one another, but their force of attraction are just IMFs, intermolecular forces. So we still have two or more things combining, but rather than them being chemically bonded, we have a slightly weaker force called an IMF, and the only way to separate those then, and those are much easier to separate. They aren't something that to break this apart, you need to chemically break them. We can boil something, and that would potentially break its IMF. We can dissolve something, and that would break its IMF. So the IMF is a force of attraction that holds things together but doesn't change the chemical structure. So when we think about it in terms of classifications of matter, chemical combinations is compound, physical combinations are all mixtures. So when I mix something, I allow them to form IMFs with one another. When I chemically combine something, I bond them. When we think about it in the terms of chemical versus physical, if I'm chemically changing something or looking at chemical properties, that again is all about the bond, breaking and making new bonds. Where if I'm physically changing something, I'm changing IMFs. Okay? I'm increasing the spacing or breaking their intermolecular force of attraction. It's not going to change the chemical structure because I'm not breaking bonds. I'm breaking this weaker force called an IMF. So it's essentially a weaker magnet. Okay? It's the idea that if I had these two things, there might be a force of attraction between these two atoms right here, but it's not a bond. It's just something that's kind of holding them together, they're a little resistant to me pulling them apart, but I can pull them apart, and that would be breaking the IMF. So if you look at it pictorially, which we've talked a little bit about, the bond are those sticks, right? And then the IMFs are what holds a solid together or a liquid from just flowing away. A lot of times we represent them by a dashed line. So if we look at the chemical compound water, this would be a bond, right? Something chemically holding oxygen to hydrogen together, and this would move as a group. If you put another water molecule near this water molecule, they will form an IMF, and we represent that with a dashed line. There's still a force of attraction here between those two elements, but it is not an actual bond. So bonds are solid lines, IMFs are dashed lines. We will deal with all of these more in depth throughout this year, but that's kind of a beginning understanding of these two different concepts. That's it for this. Have a nice night.